for over 30 years, the mission of this museum is to educate, motivate, and inspire the next generation. And one of our co-founders, Jan Palmer, who Admiral Walsh knows quite well, always used to tell the story about the air show, how airplanes inspire a young man or a young woman. And he always had examples of that. And this is certainly an example of what's going to inspire the next generation. Early on, we got wind of the possibility of getting the Blue Angel here at the museum early last year. We were obviously very excited. We had plans. We were faced with a pandemic unknowns, a potential shutdown of the museum for several months. We're great fundraisers. We didn't really have a way to raise money to bring that plane in, transportation costs, and also raise money for survivors at the same time, various bills, salaries, etc. That's where the DFW tailhook came in to save the day. It's not a social group. It's a group of heroes. But they came in and saved the day. They said they could raise the funds to bring the plane in, and they did. And it's a lot of hard work by all the members of the DFW tailhook. It's not the first occasion we had cross paths with them. In early 2019, they did a similar thing. They raised the funds, the efforts to bring in the EX6 Prowler that we had on the North parking lot. So when they told us they could do that, we knew they could. They knew what they say they're going to do. Now, so it's been certainly an honor. So credit where credit is due. DFW tailhook has made today happen. I want to introduce John Miller, who's representing the organization. John is a former Blue Angel pilot himself. So I want to introduce John and make some introductions, give some credits. But without saying, or the entire museum family, especially the children, students that we serve, our sincere appreciation for DFW tailhook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Well, good afternoon. What a great news today to be here at the museum to celebrate this aircraft. On behalf of the DFW Tail Workers Association, I would like to thank you for joining us today. Being here for the induction dedication of this Blue Angel F-A-18 aircraft that we brought here to the museum.
That microphone is not directional. You got to hear
that. And just raise your hand if I'm not doing this correctly, and I'll try to do a better job. The DFW Tail Workers Association was established in 2018, and we are comprised of retired Navy, Marine Corps personnel who serve in aviation squadrons. The primary mission of the DFW Tail Workers to help no-profit organizations such as the Frontiers of Flight, deep visibility of naval aviation before the American public, and to help to educate them as well. In 2019, after we brought the EX6B Prowler here to the museum, Dan Steelman, Vice President here of Collections and Exhibits, looked at me with a wry smile on his face and said, "Hey, why don't you bring Blue Angel F-18 to us?" Well, that was a lot easier said than done, and I thought the odds were very long. But the odds got better when we learned, in fact, that the team, Blue Angels, were going to transition, retire the legacy Hornets, transition to the newer F-18E Super Hornets. At that time, what we proposed, and we were talking to the museum about this. We asked the museum, "Would you really want this airplane?" And they said, "Yes, we did. We wanted the airplane." So we got the ball rolling. Museum formally requested from the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, to be able to get one of these airplanes. Bill Campbell, who is a member of our organization and also an ex-Blue Angel, was talking directly with the Blue Angels and also with the Naval Aviation Museum and helped put in a good word for the museum. The museum subsequently gained approval to get the aircraft. But as Dan Hamilton just told you, there was one glitch. The museum did not have the money to bring the aircraft here. So that's when DFW tailworkers stepped in. So we immediately got in the program to raise funds to try to make the money necessary so we can bring the aircraft here. Obviously, by virtue of the fact that the airplane's here, we are successful. This aircraft to the museum. Now, bringing this aircraft here depended upon generous contributions from many individual and our corporate sponsors. Many of them are here with us today. We cannot thank you enough for your support, particularly in this difficult time, which is hard for fundraising. You have our deepest appreciation and gratitude. Acquiring this aircraft also required hundreds of hours of volunteer work from the DFW tailworkers. I would specifically like to thank the members of my committee for the work they did on this, and I would like to ask them to stand as I introduce them now. Bill Campbell. Thank you. Champney. Thanks, Solomon. And where are you? There you are. Very welcome. I would now ask that all the DFW tailworkers please stand up. Thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize two other organizations that were critical with their support once the aircraft actually arrived here Love Field. The Business Jet Center graciously allowed us to use their hangar. This was very important so that the folks that were working on reassembling this airplane were able to do so in a controlled environment. Also, Southwest Airlines, my employer for 31 years, that loaned us a forklift and also material support, which were instrumental in putting this aircraft back together. So to Jason Pons, Business Jet Center, and your leadership, and to Southwest Airlines, maintenance leadership, and Don Rhodes, thank you. Along with our keynote speaker, Admiral Walsh, we also have some other former Blue Angels in attendance. I would like to introduce them to you now. From the 1976 and 77 teams, my leader, Casey Jones. 1985-86 team, Bill Campbell. 86 through 88 teams, Wayne Molnar. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing this occasion. The Blue Angels were formed in 1946 by direction of Admiral Chester Nimitz. Our keynote speaker this afternoon followed in his footsteps and became Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. During his illustrious naval career, one of his assignments was 3 years serving with the Blue Angels, And in 1987, the first year the team flew the F-18 Hornet, he was number 4 of the SWAT pilot. In recognition of his exemplary service to our country, we dedicate this aircraft with the markings as he flew it in 1987. Thank you, Tom. I privilege now to introduce to you Admiral Walsh.
JJ, thank you. Great to be able to be with you today. Dallas Tailhookers, former Blue Angels, Frontiers of Flight Museum, Dallas Jet Center, all those who have been part of this effort. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to stand before you today and just say thank you. It's great to be from Dallas. It's great to be here with my wife, Annie Kay, who, if you haven't met, please come up and say hello to her before the day's over with. I met her at an air show. It's a true story. We did the air show at Dobbins. We were in Atlanta. She worked for Coca-Cola. I saw her at the reception. She was surrounded by a bunch of guys in suits, and I knew that I wasn't going to have an opportunity, but the benefit of 20/20 vision and good judgment, I leaned into the microphone. I asked the master of ceremonies if we could have our picture taken with that girl in the back. And after 32 years of marriage, 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a mortgage, we're living the dream here in Dallas. Thank you for welcoming. You know, for many of us, it's hard to believe because most of us were here at the time. But 5 years ago, we said goodbye to Jan Coleman. Jan Coleman was the founder, had the original vision and the drive behind what you see and hear today. It was him and Bill Cooper and K. Bailey Hutchison. But Jan was the driver. He was the visionary, and he was the driving force that put this building in place and brought it to life. Extraordinary man. He led an extraordinary life, magnificent leader, renowned businessman. He was a published writer. He was an artist. He was a supporter of education, and he was an aviation enthusiast. And his passion and his life's work are represented here in what we see and what we can touch and what we can talk about. Jan would love this day, and he would relish it, and to understand from his perspective, to understand why you really have to look at this setting, this backdrop, and this audience through his eyes, where the open runway, a crisp outside air temperature, and a clear horizon would draw his gaze, bring a smile to his face, and a twinkle in his eyes. Time spent with Jan was more than just simply interesting, because he was engaged and he was involved and he was successful at so many different levels. Each conversation was an opportunity for those who had an audience with him to laugh, to relax, to learn from so many different topics and subjects that he was engaged in. And he had a direct involvement and a passionate interest about so many aspects of life. And for those of us who were in the audience with him, whether it was a meal or over a cup of coffee, we knew that we were being coached and mentored by one of the best. Discussions with Jan about business would take you on a path to the life and challenges of his experience joining the workforce on an assembly line at a young age, becoming a single-seat carrier-based fighter pilot, transitioning to the private sector, working up the company leadership ladder, followed by the adventure and uncertainty of carrying out a path to start his own business, and the extraordinary lessons that he would learn and then share with you when he published the book. Jan had a passionate interest in people and wanted to tackle some of the most complex problems and challenges of our time. He was comfortable with facts, knew them well, and was always prepared. He would structure arguments with research and precision in words and logic and clarity. And he'd apply those insights and life experiences and rose to levels of civic leadership in our community here in Dallas. He had an insatiable appetite for history and for art, his experience with international cultures, and a long-standing passion for education, where he saw a critical path to the future. But by far, the most interesting and rewarding aspect for Jan was the role of flying in his life. For Jan, the subject of flying captures the man at his essence, that opened the door and a map into his worldview, his life, and what motivated him, and the passion that fueled his heart. He was an acrobatic pilot who flew some of the same show sites as the Blue Angels. We would see him perform during the season. Oftentimes, he'd offer up the opportunity to fly together. And when he did, Jan gave you a chance to connect and to experience life in a truly remarkable way. In its simplest form, time stopped when you were with Jan. He gave us a chance to dream big dreams and then realize them. At its most basic level, this exchange of ideas and dreams that fueled them was powerful. At its roots, he thought of flying up as a spiritual experience. As I look around today at this marvelous testimony to man and machine, I realize that Jan was everywhere for most people, and in more ways than we'll ever really know. I always will be grateful for his time and his generosity. He made us more aware of life and all that it had to offer. And by the sheer force of his love of life and the zeal in which he pursued it, he made me want to dream big dreams too. Today, among all of his friends, all those who benefited from his many gifts, and all those who will bring this museum to life every day, we can see that Jan gave us all an opportunity for our dreams to continue. And here today, he gave us this wonderful opportunity to not only display artifacts of history, but in his own way, make the connection, put everyone at ease, describe the context of the human narrative, and to share the dream and tell the story today of the Blue Angels. Not simply with the introduction of artifacts, but for the opportunity to inspire the next generation by what you see represented here today. As we recognize the transition of the Navy Flight Demonstration Squadron to the next type model series in its prized history of airships, we should remember the modest beginnings of the team. In a compressed period of substantial downsizing of ships, aircraft, and submarines, as well as the demobilization of more than 3 million people, 3 million sailors, to 484,000. In the period immediately after the war, the team was born. That is the traditional context that we have come to understand as far as the motivations for starting the team in World War II. But I would suggest there's another reason why it's important to memorialize the role of naval aviation with the instantiation of an aviation demonstration team immediately after the war. Something more intangible than to ensure simply a fair share cut of resources, manpower, and future defense budgets, but in another sense entirely, to capture the spirit of naval aviation that had come of age as a force that would change the arc of history 6 months after the American entry into the Pacific campaign. That burgeoning dimension of American sea power came of age at the Battle of Midway. Nimitz never forgot the defining moment of the Pacific War, when he had lost more battles than he had won. In June of 1942, Navy pilots reached beyond themselves, pushed their machines beyond their limits, and risked everything beyond their imagination, understanding, or comprehension. Naval aviation changed the course of history of the Pacific campaign, and that began with a single battle. One that historians would later claim that by any standard, we had no right to win. Outnumbered, against staggering odds, but not outclassed, U.S. forces sank 4 enemy aircraft carriers and forced the enemy into a defensive action that foreshadowed the outcome of the Pacific War. Historian Samuel Eliot Morse described the battle as a victory not of just courage, determination, and skill, but of bravery, wisely applied. I think Nimitz wanted to capture the creative genius, the aviation moxie, the indomitable spirit of this fighting force, and put the demonstration of naval aviation in front of the American public so that we never forget what we as a people are capable of doing against insurmountable odds. What I have here next to me is a depiction of the Battle of Midway. It's hard for you to see from your seats. Please come up afterwards and you can take a look. As Laura would have it, this is inscribed in Nimitz's own hand. In the Pacific Fleet, we would reproduce it and use it as a farewell gift to people who had been assigned to the staff. But if you look closely, in Nimitz's hand, you see the chronology of what took place through the intelligence sources that he had, both on the Japanese side as well as on the US side, in red and blue, respectively, as far as the colors of ink are concerned. So let's think about what that really means. That means the man who orchestrated this campaign and the people who executed this unbelievable, courageous act that changed the course of history, he asked and he did this. Nimitz started this in 1946, and he asked the people who were heroes in this campaign to come here and start this. This is capturing the spirit of naval aviation and all that goes with it, all the risk, all the exposure, all the unknowns. Find a way to make it work. Beat the odds and put it in front of the American people and do it as much and as often and go as far as you can, as much as you can. For 7+ decades, we have followed Bush Forrest and the World War II veterans on the 1946 team. Each team wrestles with this challenge, the honor and the burden of history, to describe and define in their own way the representation of the best that America has to offer to each other and for each other. And to put it on display each day, we have the privilege for every flight, and with all the jets and all the pilots, the support team and the staff and the public is the witness to that discipline and that commitment represented each time we fly. As I look at the aircraft behind me, one that is so familiar, and the team that's been represented here in front of me, as well as those who are on the Zoom call, I'm again humbled and reminded of just the privilege and the opportunity to serve in the 87 season. For those who are not familiar with the airplane, it was quite a transition as we moved from the A4 to the F-18. The A4, most of us had experience in when we were learning how to fly through the training command. The airplane had a long, storied, and reliable history that we were confident in putting it in front of the crowd. In the case of the F-18, it had 2 deployments, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. And 5 out of the 6 pilots in the demonstration had never flown the airplane before. And that's what we started the 1987 season with, and then had shows by the end of March, early April of the 1987 season. Early in the experience that we had been trying to learn how to bring the airplane into the formation, I had a qualification from a previous command and used the F-18 in the summer of 1986 and brought it into the formation with the A4. In the course of that experience, we were learning how to adjust. How do we get the stick to feel right? In the A4, the horizontal stabilizer was at 1 degree, the elevator was full nose down, and it took 15 to 20 pounds of force to hold the aircraft in position, which was important in the case of doing rolls or inverted work. It's a matter of releasing backstick pressure. It allowed us to move the aircraft very nimbly and precisely we wanted that same feel in the F-18, but we couldn't recreate it. So we ran the trim full nose down. And when we did that, what I found in an overhead maneuver is I actually brought the stick up against the ejection seat and found that I lost elevator authority because we were biasing a very complicated digital flight control system. But true to naval aviation, we found an answer. And the answer was at the Tucson River. And it was someone who looked like Spencer Tracy, been there 30 years, and went to Ace Hardware and attached a spring to the stick and gave us the feel we needed. So when I went to find out who this person was, they said, we don't know, it just looks like Spencer Tracy. Which is kind of the way aviation works. We look for solutions and then we kind of move on. But I look back on that season. I look back on that team with tremendous pride, respect, and gratitude. I'll always be grateful to the 1984 team, and Hoss Pearson and Kirk Watson for the opportunity for my selection. I look back on those short years while flying with the team as a defining moment for me and my professional career, as well as having the benefit of meeting my future wife. Having had a career in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, I'll tell you that I've read plenty of leadership and management books, but the real leadership laboratory, where we learn what it meant to lead and the level of commitment it would take for sustained performance on a high-performance team, we learned here. We learned in Pensacola, we learned with the team, along with the humbling reminder to always remember and never forget, everyone wants your job. So just act like you're glad to be here. If you were to ask Wayne or Soupy or any of the other guys that have flown with the team, whether it's Casey or it's JJ or people that were on the team in the 40s through 2000, 2010 or now, what do you remember? I think what you'll hear is that individual air shows start to become a distant memory. But the honor of flying Blue Jets, traveling across the country to represent the Navy, those feelings of pride, they stay with you. They stay with you just like you might expect. But what you don't see and you don't hear too much about are the commitments that we have to the community. They're in schools, they're at events, they're in hospitals. And occasionally, someone or something serves to provide perspective and remind you of what really matters and what's truly important in our lives. When I was on the team in my second year, I visited a veterans hospital. As part of our routine, it was a Friday morning commitment. It was in the local community. I attended in uniform. A VA representative joined me in the parking lot as we walked up a long staircase from the lower parking lot to the old red brick building. When we reached the top of the terrace, yellow tape and a handmade sign steered us away from the main entrance. And it was blocked from view by a painter's target, covering renovations which had been underway, looked like, for several years. A series of makeshift signs pointed to an emergency exit door, propped open by a toolbox. A nurse met us at the door and escorted us into the building. We dodged the bare lighting that swung freely from the ceiling and sidestepped workers who were using jackhammers to break up the concrete floor as we made our way into the hospital. Our guide brought us to a stairway that had several coats of drab, olive green paint on the iron lattice work lined railing. I grasped the rail with a sense of wonderment at the condition of the building and curiosity as to the situation I had gotten myself into. I worked my way up to the second floor. The wooden floors creaked, and with each step, our small group walked down the hallway and into a ward that had several patients sitting on beds waiting for our visit. There were 5 men. They rose to their feet, braced rigidly at attention as we walked into the room. Their age appeared to represent several generations of conflict. 2 were from Vietnam, 1 was from Korea, 2 were from the Great Wars. All of them wore government-issued pajamas. All of them wore medals. 1 had difficulty standing because he was balancing himself on a crutch. the lower half of his pajamas pinned the couple in the same way. I was overwhelmed. I felt so untested and humbled. I asked him, why? Why do you stand? Why do you stand for me? Once, one man stepped forward, apparently a spokesman for the group, and said, we stand proudly for what you represent. Well, it's been more than 30 years since I met this group in a veterans hospital far away North Dakota. But even today, I carry with me a vivid memory of a summer morning with 5 men whose life experiences were more than I could comprehend. I don't remember their names. I don't know their rank as enlisted or officers. I don't remember their branch of service. I don't even remember what jobs they had. I only remember their presence. I could sense their commitment, their dedication, and their selflessness. I could see in their eyes the courage, the valor, the bravery to face unbearable odds. I could listen to their stories and learn of their love of country. I could tell by the firmness of a heartfelt handshake their honesty, integrity, and strength of character. And although they would not admit it, I knew by the lines on their faces the depth of their pain and their youthful sacrifice. We are the beneficiaries of veterans and their personal sacrifice. They are our sons and daughters, our fathers and mothers, our aunts and uncles, our friends and neighbors. And our country has been blessed throughout its history that in times of turmoil or crisis, we could always rely on fellow citizens to take great risk to themselves to protect us. These principles of service are part of the makeup of what you see behind me, of who we are and what we do. And for one seemingly fleeting moment in our lives, we have the opportunity to represent them, their families, and their sacrifice when we fly these blue jets. The sponsors recognized today, your support and donation is a bet. It's a bet on the next generation and has given us the opportunity to inspire. You may not know their names, but you've invested in the future by providing this display. So I want to thank our Tailwind sponsors, Team Sewell, Team Jupiter Chevrolet, our Catapult sponsors, Foster Financial Group, Adams Keegan Employer Solutions, and our individual Catapult sponsors, Scott Beach, Peter Beerton, Paul Edwards, Ken Parade, John Hogan, Robert Lyon, Michael Mahad, Kevin McGarity, Steve Van Wee, Larry Walton, and Bill Hoverstadt in memory of Captain Cecil Muir. Thanks to you and your generosity, we now have a chance to stand proud for all that you represent as well. Thank you all.